What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, May 4th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I'm going to apologize up front. I'm not going to be my normal energetic self. I've come down with another one of these bugs that Hawaii gets from all around the Pacific Rim. And so I'm a little bit under the weather, and frankly, if I were doing the boss jock with the platters that matter kind of a thing, I probably would have taken a sick day. But what we're doing here is important, so we're just going to stagger on through as best as we can. If you're watching TV right now, of course, the House just approved the new health care bill. Donald Trump is out there making a speech assuring us all that our health care insurance premiums are going to be coming down. That remains to be seen. Now, of course, it's going to go to the Senate. The Senate's probably going to make some changes on it, and then they will either vote it through or vote it down, and then so forth and so on. Now, interestingly enough, the corporate media has pretty much backed off on North Korea. We're not hearing a whole heck of a lot on the TV news, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the international media. There's a lot of stuff going on online. And apparently North Korea is still out there fanning up flames here. Russia Today is basically quoting the North Korean state media as saying, war will see Japan under radioactive clouds before any other country. And that, of course, is very provocative, and it's certainly going to be a sore point for Japan, which is the only nation in history to ever be the victim of a nuclear bomb, two of them, at the hands of the United States here. Apparently up on China's border, Chinese troops are being taught to say, don't move or I'll shoot, in Korean. They're being given some Korean phrases. The concern is that when the U.S. attacks North Korea, there'll be a huge rush for the border, and China wants to make sure that what happens in North Korea stays in North Korea. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call here from Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, Port Vida, the T-shirt looks great.
Yes, I thought you might like that.
Looks good. Hey, Mike, a couple of things I wanted to talk about. First, I wanted to praise Brandon from San Francisco. I really like this guy's attitude. I like what he did at the movie theater in response to that the trailer of Al Gore's new disinformation movie.
Yes.
So good for him. And I just wanted to see if Mike from Brazil was listening. We haven't heard from him for a long time. I really enjoyed his phone calls. He gives us the status of what's going on down in Brazil. So, Mike, if you're listening, please, we'd like to hear from you. Mike, I sent you an article yesterday about that gentleman. I think he was from Australia. He overstayed his visa by 90 minutes, and he was arrested.
Yes, I got that from you and from some other people. I think we talked about it 2 days ago.
Yes, you did, but it's amazing. You contrast that story with the story you discussed yesterday about the two gentlemen in California. They were illegals, and they've been appointed to that commission in that California town.
Yes.
I mean, it's just incredible how ass backwards, excuse my French, this country's become, that a guy can overstay his visa by 90 minutes, and then these other two gentlemen, these illegals, can get appointed to a commission in California. I guess it depends on where you are in the country. You're in one of these sanctuary cities or states.
Yeah, and of course the sanctuary cities, it's about the south of the border and the Mideast refugees, so people from Australia don't count. They don't get any slack.
Exactly. And finally, Mike, I don't know if you saw Martin Armstrong's article today, or he was answering a question from a reader about Genie Energy and how there potentially is more oil in the Golan Heights than there is in all of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, that's why Israel is now out there saying the Golan Heights belongs to us, because if it was all just dirt and desert, they wouldn't care.
Right, exactly. But it just tells you what gangsters we have in Washington. Because a lot of the people who are on that strategic advisory board of Genie, they're ex-officials, and who knows who else in terms of present representatives or senators or officials have their hands in this pot as well. So they're basically using the U.S. military as their own private army, their mercenary army to enrich themselves. That's the kind of gangsters we have in Washington today. They make the mafia look like Boy Scouts, these people. They're just despicable. And I just hate myself that my tax money is going to these people.
Well, there's nothing new about that. Again, if you go on back to Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, and he wrote this little treatise, War is a Racket, where he joined the Marines and he worked his way up the ranks to become a major general. He was one of the most popular Marine commanders in Marine Corps history. And after he retired and he felt it was okay for him to tell the truth, and he said, yeah, that's exactly what it was. My entire career was going into other countries and slapping them down for the benefit of financial interests in the United States.
Right, and another reason why Israel wants the terrorists to be in charge, because they'll have chaos in Damascus and nobody to negotiate. Nobody to negotiate with. How convenient. And by default, they get to keep the Golan.
Yeah, that's basically it. At this point, Israel's statement is the Golan belongs to us, and there isn't going to be any negotiation whatsoever. Israel's concern is that if Assad stays in power, Assad might militarily take the Golan back, whereas if Syria is broken up into chunks and balkanized, then there's nobody left there to try and recover the Golan.
Right. Well, Mike, feel better. Have a glass of whiskey or something that you like to drink, and feel better. Feel better soon.
All right, I certainly will do that. I can't do too much of that today because tonight is choir rehearsal night for Claire's choir, and I'm her roadie. I plug the wires together. I do all this kind of stuff. Bob,
yeah, it wouldn't be a good idea to show up at the choir rehearsal drunk.
Probably not. Probably not. Anyway. Okay, thanks an awful lot, Bob. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Now, you're hearing all this propaganda about North Korea's belligerence, and people are saying, well, why could they hate us? And it's really very, very simple, according to this article from The Intercept. They remember the Korean War. Now, to be historically accurate and fair, following the end of World War II, Japan had to give Korea back, but two different governments set up and said, we're the legitimate government, and that led to the North invading the South. The North did start the war, to be very accurate. But the U.S. came in on the South Korean side, and they just shredded North Korea, killed off 20% of the population. There wasn't a single building left. The devastation of North Korea was worse than anything that you saw out of World War II Europe. In fact, the U.S. dropped more tonnage of bombs on North Korea than they had on the entire Pacific Theater during all of World War II. And the people of North Korea remember that. And they're very, very angry about a possible insertion by the United States into that country. And that's why they're all rooting for Kim Jong-un to get the nuclear weapons to a deployable state. Because that's the only thing that's going to stop the U.S. from coming back on into North Korea and doing the same brutality all over again. And it makes common sense, especially the older generation in North Korea. They remember what it was like. They had to basically rebuild from the rubble. It's a very real present memory for them. And most Americans have forgotten about it. Most Americans' impression of the Korean War is the TV series MASH. And that's hardly an accurate depiction of what was done to those people. Now, trying to provoke Kim Jong-un into doing something that's actionable, France, Britain, Japan, and the U.S. have begun yet another military drill in the Sea of Japan near North Korea. They're doing all these things to try and get Kim Jong-un to react. They fired 2 Minuteman III test missiles so far. They've openly announced they're flying drones over North Korea. They're openly talking about commandos that are ready to go into North Korea and take out the ballistic missile sites, the nuclear sites, and so forth, which is a bit of a gamble. They're betting that they know where they are. But making these announcements public, it's like a picador at a bullfight. It's there to get the bull angry, in this case Kim Jong-un, to get him to do something overt that can be seized on as the justification for going on into North Korea. And so far, Kim Jong-un hasn't bitten. He had one missile test that apparently was deliberately self-destructed, so it did not leave North Korea's territorial space. North Korea is saying they're going to have their 6th nuclear test, but so far they're holding off. I think Kim Jong-un is trying to defuse this thing without him personally backing down and losing face, which is a big deal in the Asian cultures here. Now, China is actually showing a great deal of maturity here, saying that all sides in the North Korea standoff need to stop irritating one another. And they're talking about Kim Jong-un's belligerence, the United States' belligerence, and China is saying everybody's got to calm on down, or they're not going to be responsible for what happens down in North Korea. The United States is trying to get China to be their foil in North Korea, and China is saying, we're not going to be able to do what you want while you're still sending weapons off the coast of North Korea. You're going to have to back off if this is really going to work. And amazingly enough, with this apparent impartial approach to the situation by China, North Korea has now issued a mild chastisement to China for betraying North Korea by not unilaterally standing by North Korea's point of view. But China understands if there is a war in North Korea, if nuclear weapons are used, even if they're accidentally detonated or burned, the prevailing winds in that part of the world are going to carry the radiation in part onto Chinese territory. They certainly don't want that. Japan certainly doesn't want that, with the memory of 2 nuclear bombs and Fukushima on their hands. One of the things that keeps bothering me are all these stories about the threat by North Korea to Hawaii, right here, where I am sitting. And there have been more than a few of them, and the latest one is coming out of the Daily Star over in Great Britain, saying that if North Korea were to launch a nuclear missile at Hawaii, that the population here would have mere minutes to get to some kind of a shelter. And we don't actually have any kind of an organized underground shelter for civilians. Plenty of them for the military, but not for the civilian population. Now, I was going over on Nuke Map, and on the presumption that a North Korean nuclear warhead will have the same yield as their largest test to date, which is 10 kiloton, Claire and I would actually survive it if they had an accurate hit down on Pearl Harbor. We'd probably get some windows broken, but we could actually get through that and make a bunch of videos and post them on YouTube. All right, moving along here. Now, what's really going on in North Korea? The last couple of days, we've had all these articles about is North Korea a distraction for a planned invasion of Syria from Jordan? It may well be. Is it a distraction from Donald Trump's domestic difficulties and his failure to keep his commitments to his supporters? Could be that as well. But there is something else going on here. And over at RINF.com, they have an article saying that what this is really all about is Syria, Iran, North Korea is part of a program to encircle Russia with that Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense Missile System. It's an anti-ballistic missile system. It's a clear violation of the ABM Treaty. But that's what they're trying to do in order to put Russia at a disadvantage in the event of a nuclear war. And there's a lot of belligerence going on out there. General Curtis Scaparrotti, the top military commander in charge of NATO and U.S. forces in Europe, is demanding more armored vehicles and personnel be deployed to the continent to counter Russian aggression. Still parroting that one. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there with another article. And as you know, Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying that his sources that he still has inside the government are saying that the U.S. is seriously thinking about a nuclear attack on Russia and China. And Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying that this crisis in North Korea is a complete fabrication by Washington, D.C. North Korea hasn't been at war with anybody since the ceasefire was signed in the Korean War, 1953. So North Korea has not attacked or invaded anybody in 64 years, a record that certainly the United States cannot match. And as we heard from the veteran who had served in South Korea on the DMZ, North Korea's military is not geared for invasion. It's defensive. They don't have the ability to project power. They have lots of tunnels, lots of artillery, lots of gun emplacements to stop their nation from being invaded. But they don't have the military strength to cross a border into another country. And Paul Craig Roberts is saying, again, this is all about using North Korea or Iran or Syria as an excuse to put these anti-ballistic missiles around Russia to keep them from reaching their targets. Now, there is a small problem with that, and it has to do with the latest generation of nuclear weapons from Russia. And that is, they are maneuverable. Now, all ballistic missile defense systems are built around a doctrine of being able to intercept an incoming target, incoming threat, that is following a predictable ballistic path. It's going on up, you get a radar track on it, the computers say, all right, it's going to be in this part of the sky at this moment, have your interceptor there, and all will be well. The problem is the latest generation of Russian warheads are maneuverable. They weave back and forth, they dipsy-doodle, they corkscrew. And that makes a ballistic intercept very, very, very difficult. And we already know the actual track record of these radar-guided ground interceptors isn't all that good. During the Second Iraq War, we were being told that Patriot had a 90% success rate. Well, if Russia lobs 10 nuclear weapons at a major U.S. city, and Patriot gets 9 of them, or THAAD gets 9 of them, that's still one bomb coming on in, and one nuclear weapon can really ruin your whole day. But the problem is, we found out after the Iraq War was over, Patriot really didn't do that well. In fact, they're saying its success rate was less than 50%. We may presume THAAD is not much superior to that. And look over at Israel and Palestine, where Israel is using up those Iron Dome missiles by the dozens to hit just one of these homebrew rockets heading across the fence. The reason? The homebrew rockets are unstable, and they wiggle while they fly, and that's why they can't be hit. So anybody who thinks that is going to be an impenetrable shield, I'm sorry to disappoint you, it is not going to happen. Now, turning over to Syria, there's a Christian village of Ma'alula, and apparently from September 2013 to 2014, they were fighting for their very existence. The Free Syrian Army, most of whom aren't actually from Syria, were terrorizing, kidnapping, murdering locals, targeting Christians and historic holy sites, including a local convent. And they kidnapped and abused some of the nuns there. Well, apparently after months of fighting and heavy losses sustained by the Syrian government, the village has finally been taken back from the terrorist occupation. So that's got to be a source of triumph, taking that village back. And again, this idea that the U.S.-backed mercenaries were targeting Christians in Syria is something that somehow never made it to the corporate media. Now, apparently, Russia has started setting up military installations in northeastern Syria. And they're setting them up in an area currently held by the Kurds. The danger here is we are getting closer and closer to a direct military confrontation between U.S. forces and Russian forces, and where that could go is too horrible to think. But everybody's playing brinksmanship here. The possibility of it getting out of control. All it takes is one hothead. Push a button. Things are really going to be noisy. Now, apparently, Turkey, Iran, and Russia have signed an agreement calling for the creation of 4 safe zones in Syria. This is a proposal rejected by the U.S.-backed fighters who apparently walked out of the press conference at the Kazakh capital. So, again, they're talking safe zones, but these are the Russian safe zones, not the American safe zones, and that's why there's all the friction. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I just got an email from Mike in Brazil, and he apologizes for not calling in. And I'm not going to go into any kind of fine details. He has a very good excuse why he cannot call on in, but he says he will be able to call in the very, very near future. But he is listening to the show, and he was very grateful for Bob in Las Vegas' shout-out to him. All right, so that's where we are on that one. Now, here's a very interesting and alarming story. This is coming out of Sputnik News, where apparently Al Jazeera has been hired to film a false flag, fake chemical attack against civilians. They actually saw Al Jazeera camera crews out there, stringers in Syria, and apparently it was ordered on behalf of a European country. It was revealed by a military and diplomatic source earlier today. And apparently it was a big, big production. They had about 30 fire engines and ambulances, as well as 70 local residents with children transported from a refugee camp, and they were used in the filming across 3 locations in Idlib province. So they've got a big production there. They're getting ready to scream that Assad gassed his own people. And I don't care how much money they put into the production, they still can't get around the absurdity of the claim itself. Assad has nothing to gain with such a chemical attack and everything to lose. And you should feel insulted that the propagandists think you're actually going to buy this nonsense, even with all the Hollywood glitz and lots of props and lots of bodies. It's still a lie, because it doesn't make any sense. Look for what should be there and isn't, and what isn't there is a motive for Assad to do something this stupid, knowing it would justify a full-on U.S. invasion, which we keep hearing talk. The U.S. forces are now in Jordan on the border. Now, further north, Afghanistan is turning into an endless perpetual war. This is out of OriginalAntiWar.com. 300 Marines have returned to Helmand province in Afghanistan. And basically, you need to remember, back in 2009, 2010, 20,000 Marines beat back the Taliban in the region. And as soon as the Marines left, the Taliban came right back on out and took the territory over again. They weren't going to fight and die to defend a piece of dirt. They would simply pull back, and when the Marines left, they'd come on back. It was a complete failure. And even General David Petraeus said those were fragile gains and they were easily reversible. So we're stuck in Afghanistan, graveyard of empires, still having to garrison Iraq, still up to our neck in Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, still drooling after Iran and ultimately Russia and China. What could possibly go wrong? Now then, there was a video that was put out. It's already been pulled off the net. And it was released by a pro-Israel public relations group that had a very stark message for Europeans. Your continent is about to be obliterated by Islamic armies, and if you, Europe, don't stop the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, Jerusalem will permit the catastrophe to occur. That's the threat coming from Israel. Drop BDS, or we're just going to open the sluice gates and let Europe be overrun by Islamics. It's already happening. And unless Israel wants to claim that they are the author of this mass migration, I don't think they're really in a position to say one way or the other what's going to happen. It's a bluff. But in any event, the video caused enough of a ruckus where it's already been pulled off the web. Now, Israel has a law that provides official financial compensation for all Israeli Jewish terror victims. But it's been denied to 8-year-old Ahmed Dwabshi's case because he's not actually a citizen of Israel. His family were burnt to death in their home 2 years ago by Jewish settlers, who, by the way, has still not been charged for that crime. And so this 8-year-old boy has no means of support. And Israel's just saying, you're not a citizen, you're on your own. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. I'm checking my mailbox, and an alert listener reminded me that President Bush actually pulled the United States out of the ABM Treaty back in 2002. So I stand corrected on that. Now, getting on back to this threat, if you will, by Israel, that unless Europe shuts down the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, Israel will allow the continuing flood of Islamics into Europe to bring Europe down. And Israel does have reason to be worried. I mean, Israel's official position is BDS is not having any effect whatsoever, but shut it down anyway. And so now we're looking at this story that came out of electronicintifada.com. There's been a new poll done here in the United States of America, and 40% of Americans back sanctions on Israel because of the illegal settlements on occupied Palestinian land, which is a crime under international law. Amazingly enough, Democrats, 56% of Democrats back economic sanctions or tougher actions against Israel. And what this tells us is that there is a growing public opposition to the unquestioned support for Israel displayed by the U.S. government. It's about time. Now, here's a story that came out of Matrix Bob, and it's more of this information coming on out from James Comey's appearance before the Senate committee the other day. And it relates to an email that surfaced in which it stated, Attorney General Loretta Lynch made sure that the FBI probe of Hillary Clinton didn't go too far. And Comey was asked to comment on this. And what he said was, that's not a question I can answer in this forum, Mr. Chairman, because it would call for a classified response. I have briefed the leadership of the intelligence committees on that particular issue, but I can't talk about it here. Might as well have a flashing neon sign on the front of his head saying, cover up, cover up, cover up, cover up. In other words, yeah, we protected Hillary Clinton. We can't tell you why. Or we're not going to tell you why. And again, this goes right to the heart of my theory about what was really going on with that private email server. It was a replay of the 1994 Chinagate scandal. Selling secrets to foreign interests using that weak email server to deliver the product and that charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. And a large amount of the money that went into the Clinton Foundation did come from foreign sources. Now, Comey also leapt to the defense of Huma Abedin and was basically saying that it was just sort of automatic, that the classified emails were being forwarded to Anthony Weiner's laptop, which was actually shared by Anthony and Huma while this was all going down. And the issue is that these classified emails were outside a controlled, secure system, and Anthony Weiner did not have a security clearance. Comey is saying Anthony probably didn't read them. He's too busy taking pictures of himself and sending them around. But he doesn't actually know that for a fact. And Comey goes on to say that the FBI cannot prove that Huma Abedin had any kind of criminal intent in sending these emails from a secured server to an unsecured laptop. Now, one of two things is going on here. Either FBI Director James Comey is ignorant of Title 18 U.S. Code Section 793, Paragraph F, which clearly states that intent is not required to be in violation of exposing classified information, or he just hopes that you are ignorant of that. But that's what the law says under Title 18. Intent is not required. The mere act of exposing classified information in an insecure environment, that's the violation. Negligence, carelessness, forgetfulness. It doesn't matter. Intent does not matter. Huma Abedin, along with Hillary Clinton, is clearly in violation of Title 18 U.S. Code 793. And Comey has to know that, or he's just another incompetent federal government boob who has his position through politics. But that is the letter of the law. So Comey is up there still carrying the water for Hillary Clinton and whatever it was they were doing with those classified emails. And we're not talking just once or twice. We're talking constant leakage of this material from inside the secure email system at the State Department to unsecured private email servers and laptops. Intent is not required. All right, let's talk about the economy now. A lot of people are looking down at Puerto Rico because the Commonwealth is seeking the largest municipal bankruptcy filing in U.S. history. They're more than $70 billion in debt, which is more than... I'm hearing music. Okay, a little background music here. That's more than 4 times the debt Detroit collapsed under. And so they're looking at this bankruptcy. They're trying to get the creditors to take less. But a bankruptcy of this scale could begin a domino effect. We know there's a lot of other states, a lot of other cities that are also hovering on the edge of bankruptcy, because that is the ultimate fate of anyone who's enslaved to a private central bank. Because private central banks, I'm going to say it one more time because this is the key part, private central banks create more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt becomes unsupportable. And then you start seeing these extreme measures like Puerto Rico's bankruptcy, Hawaii's talking bankruptcy already, Detroit's already gone. And Puerto Rico's bankruptcy is just one of the warning signs out there that we are getting very, very close to a major, major event. The European Union is trying to blackmail the member states that want to leave. Now they want 100 billion euros from Great Britain. According to ADP, employment is actually in decline. U.S. auto sales are in decline. There are more credit delinquencies among the American people. And none of this is going to improve until there is some mechanism to recycle the wealth accumulated at the very top back down to the working and middle classes as decent wages and salaries, so they can pump it back into the economy and keep it going by buying new cars, new TVs, new clothes. Get out of debt. We'd all like to do that. The money just isn't there. Now, one of the articles of belief of those who support Keynesian economics and the Federal Reserve is that the debt doesn't really matter. The debt has to increase to keep the money supply out there, and that's why we just keep more money, and that's why we're so rich. Well, we're not rich. We're in debt. That piece of ink and paper, that Federal Reserve note, is not a unit of value. It is a unit of debt, and it is accruing interest as it sits there in your pocket. In the end of this whole Ponzi scheme, private central bank, profits for the bankers, profits for Wall Street, more debt for the people. Take a look at what's happened in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Greece. It's spreading like a contagion across the world, and it is going to hit here. Now, speaking of Greece, apparently Germany has pulled the plug on Greece's debt deal and says they will not even consider another bailout until Greece passes more laws to cut pensions, more austerity on its citizens, and start selling off the assets of the nation of Greece into private hands. And that's actually the goal of the private central bankers. They know those pieces of paper aren't worth anything. It's that debt obligation that is imposed on you to control you, And the end goal is for the bankers to have all the hard assets of the people and the nation. And all it took them to do it was ink and paper. Over in Silicon Valley, which is showing an amazing degree of chaos currently in their investment market, but there's still a huge amount of money floating around there. Tech billionaires are out there spreading it around. Housing prices have gone up. And apparently, even mobile homes for retired people, the rents are being driven up. And citizens there are trying to raise funds to campaign for a rent control measure. That Silicon Valley economy is sort of a microcosm of what's happening to the country as a whole. There are some incredibly rich minority, and it's making life difficult for everybody else. And that's exactly what's going on. By the way, if you live in Orange County, California, and you are making $84,000 a year, that is now considered low income. $84,000 a year is not middle class anymore, it's low income because of the skyrocketing costs to house and feed your family. And food prices are going to get really whacked because of this very late spring snow. We'll be talking about that a little bit more later in the show, but we're going to take some phone calls. Anthony in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. Hi. On your topic regarding the housing prices, the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, is just skyrocketed.
Okay.
And I'd like to ask your opinion regarding that because I have a suggestion, and I want to know what you think about it. Since they have a salary cap on NFL owners and basketball owners on the amount of money they can spend on free agents, I was wondering if they should do the same thing with in regards to these financial and real estate oligarchs, since they have a monopoly on the markets, on the amount of real estate they can own or on the amount of real estate they can spend. What do you think of that?
Well, it's an interesting idea. I don't know how much the San Francisco real estate market is being monopolized. I thought there was quite a few players, but what is driving the prices up is they're back into this issue of flipping the properties to run their values up to create artificial equity out of thin air that can then be cashed out. It's basically what was going on in 2006, 2007, leading up to the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. But it is a form of manipulation, and it's good for the holders of the real estate and those who are engaged in that business of housing flips. But what it does is it raises all housing prices and valuations and rents for people who are not part of this mechanism, people on fixed incomes, and that's what's happening to these people in Silicon Valley who are living in mobile homes. The article I was quoting from was talking about how some of these retirees are literally having to go on out and scavenge along the road for empty plastic bottles and cans to recycle just to be able to eat.
I understand that part, Mike, but something needs to be done as far as putting a cap on the amount of real estate these financial oligarchs can own and spend, because they do have a monopoly on the markets. What they do is they buy real estate, they start to gobble up real estate, and when they do, they have a monopoly. And there should be some sort of cap on the amount of real estate they can spend on, because I understand the homeowners association in San Francisco and Google and all these corporations, have a monopoly on the real estate markets, and they can manipulate the market prices by supply and demand.
Well, if they're really that monolithic, I think the existing laws, like the Sherman Antitrust Act, could be brought to bear. I think in terms of these people who are stuck in the mobile homes, the most immediate relief is by having a rent control measure in certain sectors of the city where people on fixed incomes, the retirees and everything, there should be a limit on how much their rent can be raised. It's hard for me to see somebody seeing a mobile home escalating in value. Of course, what's escalating in value is the land underneath it. But mobile homes are not built to last anywhere near as long as a regular house. They wear out pretty quickly. But I think that would do.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, again, I would want to verify just how much of a real estate monopoly or cartel is actually operating here. But again, we could draw an example from the early years of radio and television and newspaper in this country, where there were laws that limited how much any individual or corporation could own in terms of radio stations, TV, and newspapers to preserve a diversity of opinion. The same thing could be applied to the real estate market to increase competition, which would bring a higher service, higher value, and lower costs to the ordinary people. But again,
okay, Mike,
I want to study the actual numbers and see how big a problem that really is. In the meantime, I hope the campaign for rent control in Silicon Valley goes through.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I hope that does go through because seniors, especially seniors, are being affected by this, by the rising cost of the housing cost, their rent going up. And there should be a limit to that, as far as their fixed income, because they're being the ones being squeezed. And there's no middle class in San Francisco anymore. You're either low income or you're making $85,000 or more per year.
Well, that's still considered low income in Orange County, California. They had a whole list of all these places where these sky-high salaries are considered low income. Hawaii is number 4 on the list. All right, well, listen, Anthony, we're going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take another phone call. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. I have a theory I want to run by you. And what it is lately I've noticed that every once in a while Donald Trump mentions Andrew Jackson.
Yes.
I noticed that CNN, MSNBC, they've been kind of kidding around. Oh, he's got dementia, and he keeps mentioning Jackson. And one person said, oh, it's because he likes his hairdo or whatever. Here's my theory, and I could be wrong. I think he's throwing us a dog whistle. Keep mentioning Andrew Jackson, because what did Andrew Jackson do? Nationalize the bank.
Well, he didn't nationalize it. He shut down the second bank of the United States, at which point there was an assassination attempt on his life. But during his campaign, Donald Trump was talking about taking a hard line with the Federal Reserve, and he did refer to Andrew Jackson. Apparently he's got a painting of Andrew Jackson in the White House on prominent display, and this, of course, does make the Federal Reserve very, very nervous because they don't like it when a president gets too big for their britches and tries to shut down their little scam.
I think he's throwing a dog whistle at us so we get the idea what he's trying to do. It's like, look at Iceland, how well they've done.
Yes.
They got rid of the bankers, defaulted on their loans, and now their monetary system, the corona, is the strongest in the world.
Yeah, it is. We reported on that yesterday. And Iceland, through the criminal bankers in prison, other countries actually execute them. That's how serious they consider banker crime to be. And they didn't default on the debt. They wrote off all the debt that was created through fraud. And Iceland's economy is doing very well, which is why you never hear about Iceland's economy in America's corporate media. They're worried that it might give all of you debt slaves uppity ideas about freedom.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to run that theory by you.
Okay, well, at this point, I'm not interested in dog whistles or banners or hints. I want to see some action. And so far, Trump has been very disappointing in that particular regard. and I'm really not even paying that much to what he says anymore, unless it's funny, which he's capable of doing. But I want to see what he's actually doing. I want to see his signature on bills that actually fundamentally change this country, get it back on a track to being a republic with a democratically elected government, elected in fair, honest, transparent elections, and the economic laws changed away from this system that sucks wealth from the ordinary people and gives it to the money junkies. In fact, I'd like to see the money junkies have their own asylum someplace. And it'll be nice, a nice little place, maybe Jekyll Island. You know, they got a lot of nice, cushy buildings there, and we'll throw all the money junkies there and have sharks in the water around the island so they can't leave. Throw filet mignon and Perrier water over the gate to keep them fed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. Take a quick break for our station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. I got an email from a listener up in Washington State. Everybody's talking about what is considered low income in the United States now, and apparently in Seattle, $72,000 a year is considered low income. And what that is telling us is we are entering a period of hyperinflation. I remember when I was younger, $70,000 a year, that was like a dream salary. And now it's just barely getting by money. Now, another alarm out here is this article from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Unfunded public pension obligations grow to $5.6 trillion. And this is last October that they were doing this. And we know why the public pensions got into trouble. It goes all the way back to 2008 when Wall Street's pet rating agencies were rating those mortgage-backed securities AAA, which is what made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. Then the whole fraud collapsed. The pensions were defunded. Nobody has the cojones to stand up and point the finger or blame where it really deserves to go. But basically, according to this article, the pension system is in serious trouble, and nobody knows what to do. In terms of funding ration, Wisconsin scores the best. They're 63% funded. They're the only state that has a funding ratio above 50%. Connecticut only has 22% of their pension obligations funded. Vermont has the nation's smallest total pension obligation at $8 million. California the worst at just under $1 trillion. So that is going to be in serious. There has to be an implosion. The money just isn't there. Now, we have a caller on the line. Mario from the Netherlands. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Aloha.
Aloha.
I have a suggestion or maybe an idea how to put a brake on the rising housing prices there. Maybe the city councils can put a differential tax on the uninhabited units, housing units. You see, many housing units are bought just to put the money somewhere because on the bank they get almost zero interest, and they park the money in houses just to flip them later for a higher price or to ask for as much possible as a rent, if possible.
Yeah, you want to have somebody sitting in that building so it doesn't get victimized by metal thieves and fall into ruin, which is unfortunately happening a lot across the United States. Here in the United States, if you buy a property that is not your residence and you sell it for a greater profit, I'm pretty sure real estate is subject to capital gains tax.
No problem.
Okay.
But the idea is to put a far higher tax on that housing unit the moment it is not inhabited. So the tendency to put the money in empty houses will disappear. This is one thing. Another thing is when they keep an empty house till they find the right rent they like. And if every week the tax goes up and up, higher and higher, then the incentive to rent it at a lower price will arise by itself.
Okay, I see what you're saying now, and yes, that does make sense. Again, if somebody were to invest in a house, they don't want to leave it empty. They want somebody living there who's going to, take reasonable care of it and protect their investment. And that would be a motive to make it available as a rental property. But you're right. A higher tax on an unoccupied residence might encourage the rents to be considerably lower.
Exactly. And it should also put a brake on the rising of the prices.
Of the rental price or the sales price?
No. Also on the property price itself.
Okay.
Because a lot of capital is parked in housing instead of in other investments, and they keep the houses empty just to flip them later.
Okay, it's one possible solution.
It's an idea.
It's an idea. It's certainly worth a little more study.
Thanks. That was all.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call.
Thank you very much.
We're going to let you go here. Now, another one of the indicators that is very, very troubling, and this is coming out of Investment Watch blog, loan growth is collapsing again. Is this signaling a new recession? Now, to understand why this is a problem, what they're really saying is they're not able to find people who are willing to borrow money. Borrowers, the supply of borrowers are drying up. People want to get out of debt. They don't want to get further into debt. And most people are trying to avoid debt because of the economic uncertainty, because they don't want to borrow money for a house or a car, lose their job, and then have the house foreclosed on or the car repossessed in a black mark on their credit report. So they're holding off from doing that because of that economic uncertainty. For the last several years, we're seeing wages and salaries being driven down. Every time somebody changes a job, all they can find is paying less. So they don't want to borrow. Now, why this is a problem is very simple, and it relates to the nature of the pyramid scheme called private central banking. Because in order for the pyramid or Ponzi scheme to perpetuate, for each year, each generation, they have to find a larger and larger number of borrowers that will allow the creation of new money, part of which is then siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. And that's why there must always be an expanding base at the bottom. If that base starts to contract, the whole pyramid's going to come on down. And that's why they're screaming about loan growth being a problem. And they're out there trying to get people to borrow. We get credit card offers all the time, which we put them in the shredder. You know, we're trying to pay our credit cards off as quickly as we can before things really start to fall. And so should you be, by the way. The very existence of private central banking depends on always getting new generations of borrowers in huge, vast numbers. It's a big reason they were pushing the student loan thing. Forget about scholarships, forget about working your way through school. Oh, just take out a student loan. And they were so desperate for those borrowers, they didn't care that these kids were going to graduate from college and the high-paying jobs they'd been promised weren't going to be there. The item of value is that loan itself. All right, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Apparently, Kraft Heinz, famous for ketchup and various other condiments, is closing 6 of their factories, and they're letting 5,150 people go. No real explanation about it. It could be that people just aren't buying condiments, buying the core groceries, and they we don't need the condiments. We can't afford them here. Now, turning over to China, there's an analysis by Kyle Bass over in Zero Hedge, talking about how China's credit system expanded too fast and too recklessly, and it's beginning to unravel. And Kyle Bass is over there at Heyman Capital, and he's basically saying that ballooning assets in Chinese wealth management products are another sign of a looming credit crisis on the nation. In other words, there are going to be people who are defaulting on their loans, and they're not going to be able to sell new loans to new borrowers in order to keep the system going. And Bass was interviewed on Bloomberg TV saying some of the longer-term assets aren't doing very well. Now, it could be real economics, could also be economic warfare. We know there's a lot of that going around the globe right now. But what did in China was the fact that they were very successful as a manufacturing, exporting economy. And one of their biggest customers was the American consumer. And so China's economic prosperity was very tightly tied in with Americans' economic prosperity. But that's pretty much evaporated. And people just don't have the money to go on down to the big box store and buy those Chinese exports. Remember what I said yesterday about a century ago, marketing went from need to desire, and they're still trying to sell on desire, but the economic realities are taking us back to a need system of making our buying decisions. And that's slowing down consumer spending as well. Now, there's a little bit of interesting news, this also from Zero Hedge, basically saying that China can get out of this mess by going on to a gold-backed currency. Of course, this is viewed as a threat from the West. In fact, the headline is China's plan to subvert the global dollar standard. Well, China is hardly alone in seeing America's fiat-based fairy tale money as being dangerously unstable. And countries want to get back onto a stable economic medium of exchange that is going to be good for the nation as a whole, not just for the bankers. Early today, I was actually going through that America's Book of Secret video, The Gold Conspiracy, and watching it again, and just, in hindsight, stunned at all the things that were being said, how they've all turned out to be very accurate as to what's going on with the economy. Now, Bitcoin is soaring above $1,600 on relentless Japanese buying frenzy, which sounds really good, except to me it's another bubble. It's another pump and dump. And the Bitcoin system does have its weaknesses. Bitfinex, based in Hong Kong, it's the second largest Bitcoin exchange, appears to be headed for a Mt. Gox-style collapse. Everybody likes the idea of some kind of a currency that is not under direct control of the private central banks or the government, but we should not, in our haste, get into using a currency that is subject to manipulation and wild value swings based on buying and selling, speculation. That's not a stable currency. Cable TV industry in this country is not doing very well. Apparently, last quarter, 762,000 consumers canceled their cable TV subscription. And for a lot of areas, that means they have no TV at all, because when cable was coming on, they tried to convert the on-air broadcasters away from the old analog NTSC to a digital broadcast standard. And in many places, it has not worked on out. The signal quality isn't good enough. They did that here in Hawaii, and we're living just north of Pearl Harbor, and we can't get over-the-air digital broadcast signals from the stations down in Honolulu. Now, we're using a little internal antenna, maybe with another antenna up top. It would be better. But I think we're going to find out that a lot of people are just deciding to go without TV. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, they know the corporate media is lying to them. So why pay money to be lied to? And second, I don't know about where you are and what cable service you're on, but in this context of seriously considering getting off of Spectrum because they can't seem to get their act together, looking around the little programming guide, it's the same stuff over and over and over again. I've seen everything there at least once, if not twice. There's almost no new material being produced that makes having a cable subscription attractive. Yes, Amazon had the Grand Tour. I do like what's coming out of BBC. But you can pick up BBC on a satellite dish. Now, remember what I said before about the student loan issue? Another article out of Investment Watch blog called The Student Servitude Sham. And it says, many today believe it is morally wrong to indenture students to the degree of liabilities presently required to achieve the education required to become a productive contributor within our modern society. And they're saying it's time to ask the question, why have college costs exploded upward way out of proportion with inflation, while the high-paying jobs that these students were promised are vanishing? What's driving this process forward? Well, as I said before, what's driving the process forward is that student loan. That's the goal, to turn students into the new borrowers to keep the private central bank Ponzi scheme going a little bit further. All right, let's take a phone call here. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. Yeah, the House did pass the new bill, the Trump bill.
Yes,
the
they
health
did.
care. That was a good thing, I suppose. That's a good thing. I do want to talk about what I did hear about the numbers, Michael. But there's over 13 million illegals in the United States, and only about 4 million are actually working. The other 8 million are actually staying home, like or go to school, the kids, whatever. And I'm thinking about who's going to pay for. Are these people going to be allowed to get health care too? These 14, 13 million, whatever it is.
Well, we're going to have to.
That right there. If you got rid of them, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say we're going to have to read the actual bill after the Senate gets done making their changes. But there is absolutely no question that the illegal immigrants and the refugees are a tremendous burden on our economy. A lot of people have done analysis on it. Over in Los Angeles, their mayor is fighting immigration enforcement because apparently illegals and refugees are now the majority of the population in Los Angeles. Everybody else has been driven out. And if the illegals start getting deported, Los Angeles is literally going to turn into a ghost town. I imagine the property prices will be pretty good in that particular neck of the woods. Not that I would ever go back to Los Angeles. Those people in California are just insane.
Well, the earthquake's going to hit there one day. But anyway, Michael, what I want to also bring up to your attention is the New York Times is talking about what's going on with France.
Yes.
And this Macron and Le Pen. And Le Pen beat him up. She was brutal toward him in the debate. And she was like actually throwing daggers at him and throwing strikers at him to kill this guy. I mean, what these, of course, this guy's being backed by the Rothschilds and the Bilderbergs and, of course, Soros, this guy, Macron. You can look at him and tell who the guy is. And they're making this Le Pen out to be the biggest devil there is. And here she's trying to save the country from total annihilation. And these French are probably going to vote this guy Macron in there because they're that dumb. They're feminine. They're feminists. The men over in France, I guess, are all a bunch of feminists. I don't know, feminine. I don't know what the hell's going on in France. But if they vote that guy in over her, it's over for France.
Well, I'm expecting there to be.
Lights are out there.
I'm expecting there to be massive election fraud in the French elections.
Absolutely.
And again, the globalists are so close to their dream of a one-world government, one-world private central bank, they're not going to let a little thing like the will of the people get in their way.
Absolutely. And the Brussels from Brussels are running the whole show over there. And we know who they are, Michael. They're guys like Soros and the Rothschilds who are running the whole show. Let's not kid ourselves. But yeah, I see after this election with France, that's like Europe's gone. It's gone, Michael.
Well, again, it's too soon to write it off here because we have massive election fraud in our election last year. We had the media out there saying Hillary was going to win, and she couldn't pull it off. She couldn't steal the election. And Marine Le Pen, her poll numbers are going up. Macron is running a lackluster campaign. And you're right, in the debate, Le Pen just chewed him up and spit him out. And I think the post-debate polls are probably going to be swinging in her favor.
Yeah, Michael, but the spin doctors, they are these Zionists that are spin masters are great at this. They'll lie, they lie to the public, and they spin everything. But one more thing I got to say, Michael, when you look at California, and I saw the facts on there, there's almost 3.5 million illegals in that state. The white Anglos that are in that state, Michael, are fleeing every day like 6,000. I read that like 2 years ago in a USA paper.
Yes.
I don't know if you could bring that article up. I wish I would have saved it. And I'm saying to myself, where are these? Let's say, are these a bunch of liberals are leaving the state, or are the liberal whites still staying there, and the white conservatives are leaving the state? Because the white liberals are eventually going to be chewed up and swallowed up. That whole state of California is going to be, like I say, Cal Mexico.
I think it's probably white working middle class people who are just looking for a better place to live, lower taxes, less insanity, less political correctness. Anyway, listen, Tom, I'm going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We are hearing that oil prices are now crashing to pre-OPEC deal levels, which means somebody went rogue and is out there selling oil outside the control of OPEC. And we know a lot of oil is coming out of Syria. It's being stolen by ISIS, smuggled across the border into Turkey, and from there it's sold on the world market. Now, as you know, the Mexican drug lord El Chapo was captured last year, extradited to the United States, January of this year. And let's see. I'm hearing an echo of my feed. All right. So he was extradited to the U.S. in January. And it's estimated he made, over his 30-year criminal career, $14 billion. Well, perfect opportunity for civil forfeiture and RICO. There's only one problem. They can't find the money. Because the entire time he was operating, he didn't use the financial system. He never put any of his money in a bank or anywhere where it could be tracked. And now they can't find it. Now, as you heard earlier in the show, the House has voted through the replacement for Obamacare. It passed by a narrow margin, 217 to 213, and now it's heading for the Senate. And there are a lot of people who are still complaining and saying certain things should be there. One of the concerns from Oraz.com, and by the way, Trump is on the air saying premiums are going to go down. I'll believe that when I see that. But over at Oraz.com, they're saying pregnancy will now cost 425% more under Donald Trump's health plan compared to Obamacare. And with the most serious forms of cancer, you may have to pay up to 35 times more for health insurance under a proposed amendment. So this is another government-controlled health care plan that is written to make money for the health care industry. What they should do is deregulate and let the health insurers compete for your business with better service and lower prices. That's what competition brings. Okay. I'm hearing this weird thing, critical alert, and it's not.
I got it. I found it.
Okay, all right. The gremlins. All right, let's take a phone call here. Billy in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Last Wednesday, I think it was. I think it was last Wednesday. You touched base on a few things, but because I was hoping maybe you could revamp on it. One was about, I think it was Obama was taking actual tax money out of our funds and funding some other foreign programs or something. Or George Soros had 180.
Yeah, there was apparently
180 some.
There was apparently a slush fund in the State Department that was being used to support some of George Soros' NGOs, and that's certainly not an appropriate thing for the State Department to be doing with our tax dollars. Soros has got money. Why isn't he paying his own way? But again, he's got a lot of support from the world leaders for his global government, because every one of them goes to sleep at night dreaming that their particular butt will one day polish the seat of the golden throne of planet Earth.
Isn't that illegal, though, to do that?
I think it, I'm not familiar with the exact laws, but I think, yeah, it may have been illegal.
And one last thing, because I'll let you run on how busy you are. You mentioned also something I thought was real huge. something about some kind of banker scam John McCain was involved in, and I've never heard anything about it. I was hoping maybe you could go more into detail about that.
Well, you're talking about the Keating savings and loan scandal. Okay, yeah, and that was the Keating Five. John McCain was one of the members of Congress who used their influence to try and protect John Keating's Lincoln savings and loan. John Glenn was another one, which I thought was a terrible tarnish on his reputation as Mr. Right Stuff. But yeah, that was it, and nobody got punished for it except for Charles Keating himself. He did go to jail. Okay, we're gonna have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as we mentioned earlier in response to a phone call, the election in France is heating up. End of the week, of course, is the final runoff between Macron and Le Pen. And apparently Le Pen did very, very well in the debate. And basically, she made a statement that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with. After the election, France will be led by a woman, either Marine Le Pen or Angela Merkel, because Macron is obviously a puppet of the New World Order globalists. And right now, Angela Merkel seems to be carrying the banner, at least for the European Union. Now, Brigitte Bardot, who's a very famous French film star from a few decades ago, and she's considered an institution in France, came on out and has given her endorsement to Marine Le Pen, calling Emmanuel Macron steely-eyed. And celebrity endorsement from a celebrity on that scale is going to carry quite a bit of weight. Now, Macron may have stumbled badly during the debate. He described Marine Le Pen supporters as hateful cowards. And that may have been his basket of deplorables moment, because it did not go over well at all. Now, Theresa May is out there declaring war on Russia. Brussels. I'm sorry, I misread that. Theresa May declares war on Brussels, saying, let me fight for Britain. Because the Remain people and Brussels, they're still trying to find some way they can derail Brexit, or if Great Britain wants to go and pretend they're independent, they're still going to be financially propping up the failing EU and still have to have those open borders, which are the issues that led to the Brexit in the first place. And Theresa May is out there saying that European Union officials are meddling in this summer's upcoming UK elections. Basically saying that the EU media is being as dishonest about what's going on in Great Britain as we saw America's corporate media during the campaign last year. Meanwhile, the Tories seem to be stuck in a loop on their campaign. Their slogan is strong and stable leadership. And that's all they keep saying, strong and stable leadership, over and over and over and over. And they're not getting much traction with that one either. Now, yesterday there was some rumors going around because of a meeting called at the Palace in London. And as it turns out, it wasn't anything necessarily negative. Prince Philip has basically announced, he's the Duke of Edinburgh, he's the husband of Queen Elizabeth, and he's 95 years old, and he said, it is time for me to retire from public life and step down from his royal duties, which is going around to all kinds of celebrations, and he just said he was so tired. And in typical British humor, Sir Michael Aiea went up to Prince Philip and said, I'm sorry to hear you're standing down. And the Duke of Edinburgh replied, well, I can't stand up much longer. And apparently the Queen is fully on board with this. Now, whether there'll be another person appointed to stand with the Queen in official functions remains to be seen. I would speculate probably not. Now, as we mentioned earlier in the week, the European Union has issued orders to Austria, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway to immediately cease all border controls. And I'm wondering what the EU thinks it has to back that up. Probably scream for more money, we're going to penalize you, we're going to fine you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I think this is just going to accelerate the desire by the member states of the European Union to get on out of what has turned out to be a horrifically terrible deal. Now remember, when the European Union was originally formed, all it was supposed to be was a free trade, free travel zone. Inside the EU, the borders were down. You could travel from France to Spain to Great Britain to Italy to Germany without having to show passports or any of that. And you could also trade across the borders without restrictions. And that was something that the member states of the European Union wanted. But over the years, Brussels keeps arrogating to itself more authority and more control, and it's become a huge irritation where Brussels appears to try and justify the huge sums of money it collects by issuing very trivial, microscopic regulations on how things ought to be done, what size food should be in the supermarket. And some of it borders on the ridiculous. And that's why the EU, the member states, want to get on out. Now, the next crisis for the European Union is Poland. Poland is starting to talk about a Pexit. They want independent sovereignty. See, the member nations of the EU have no problem with being a confederation of independent sovereign states working together, like the original United States of America, with a very limited central government. But Brussels, of course, wants to federalize the EU, have one border around the outside, and Brussels in control of everything, and that is a major sticking point. We're going to take a phone call here. Bob in the Upper Peninsula, what is on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael.
Yes.
We had this thing about Hillary Clinton and the election. Her losing had nothing to do with Comey or the Russians. It was that smug look on her face that lost her the votes.
Yeah, there were a lot of factors. I mean, she wasn't likable. The polls were revealing that she wasn't likable. A lot of people did not react the way she thought they were going to react with this divisive campaign of pitting men against women and black against white. And a lot of people realized they were being played, that they were fanning up the race card, the sex card, the abortion card. And in the end, I mean, there were factors. Democrats who voted for Barack Obama voted for Trump, first of all, as a rejection of Obama's policies. And second of all, a lot of Democrats voted for Donald Trump in their outrage at how the DNC stole the nomination away from Bernie Sanders and their very cavalier attitude about it afterwards. And now we're finding out as they actually study what happened last year academically, as opposed to screaming the Russians did it, they're finding out Hillary couldn't get her base out to vote. And we knew that was going to be a reality when you go back and you look at the pictures of the rallies last year. Trump's rallies were in sports stadiums. They were full to overflowing. Hillary was in these little tiny venues like a bicycle shop. And they couldn't get anybody to show up. And that was telling us right then and there. Even though people were saying they supported Hillary Clinton, they really weren't that committed to her. And I wish we could get a real in-depth forensic analysis of the actual vote, because I think the reason Hillary didn't even have a concession speech on Election Day was she really thought she was going to be able to steal it. And we have seen indications of massive election fraud, and Trump's voters were able to overwhelm that. And when that happened, we were all delighted. We were hoping we were going to see a change, of course, of this nation. Unfortunately, we are not. We are getting some cosmetic things like a new Obamacare, but we still have a terrible economy. Where the money junkies have a death grip around the lifeblood of this nation. We're still on this war agenda leading to disaster. And so a lot of people who supported Trump are very disappointed in him. I'm certainly one of them. And I think Donald Trump is going to be a single-term president because I think when he sent those cruise missiles into Syria, he blew up his chances of a second term in office.
I think you said it all, pal.
Okay.
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, I know that within the political discourse of our country, there are people who will declare for a candidate, and from that point on, they're saying, yes, I'm supporting this person, I'm supporting, especially if the person you supported won. You want to identify with that. Yes, I was with the winning horse this time. But I think people who supported Trump do need to be very honest and objective about what has he actually accomplished in terms of, first of all, what he promised during the campaign, and with regard to the issues that really affect all of our lives. He clearly backed off on any kind of prosecutions of Hillary Clinton. They're going through the motions of interviewing Comey in the Senate. Nothing's going to come of that. Now, it's true immigration has gone into decline, but that's more coming from the illegal immigrants themselves who are now showing more caution about coming here, rather than the construction of a border wall or increased enforcement for deportation of the illegal immigrants that are actually here. I think at the end of this arbitrary 100-day period, we have to take stock and say, what has Trump actually accomplished? Not what he's said, not what he's tweeted, not what he's telegraphing or dog whistling. What has actually changed for this country in the issues that impact you the most? The economy and the wars. And right now, doesn't seem like a lot. It really doesn't. Now, there's a new problem, and it's illustrated by a story that came out of Breitbart. Up in Minnesota, active tuberculosis cases increased 12% last year to 168, up from 150 1 year earlier. Now remember, tuberculosis, before all of this open border stuff, tuberculosis was eradicated in this country. I remember when I was a kid, and there was still a problem with tuberculosis, they were, they had campaigns, fundraising, and then finally they had a breakthrough, and tuberculosis went away. And it was a horrible disease. Horrible, horrible disease to die from. And now we're finding out, according to Minnesota's Department of Health, according to their Tuberculosis Prevention and Control Program's quarterly surveillance report, 90% of those 168 cases were people who were foreign-born. And apparently, 14 of those 168 cases were diagnosed within the first year inside the United States. And the majority of those refugees came from two high tuberculosis burden countries. So they knew these people were sick. They knew they were carrying a very contagious, fatal disease, and they let them stay. Now, obviously, this is going to be a huge profit opportunity for the medical industrial complex. Oh, we've got a contagion back here. We're going to sell all kinds of tuberculosis medicines and tuberculosis vaccines, and it's going to be money, 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 money pouring out of the sky. People don't have the money for medical care. It's too expensive. People aren't getting their regular checkups. People are suffering through non-fatal illnesses just on their own. Apparently, over on May Day in Turin, Italy, there were protesters protesting the conditions in Italy, and that led to batons versus flagpoles. The police were clashing with the protesters. A lot of unhappiness over there. Down in Venezuela, and again, you should be paying attention to what's going on to Venezuela because it's going to come here soon. Apparently, the protesters down in Venezuela are being lit on fire and run over by armored cars. That is very, very scary. And all of this misery goes back to this psychologically deranged segment of our population called the money junkies. Now, here's an interesting little article. This is out of Zero Hedge, and it's called The Ferguson Effect, Baltimore Millennials' Worst Nightmare. And what it's talking about is the liberal millennials who've been out there on the forefront of screaming every time there's a mishap with the police. And as a result, the police are holding back. And what happens when the police holds back? Crime goes up. And Baltimore is turning this theory into a reality. The city is now in decline as we head to the start of summer. And it's caught the millennials off guard who thought that they were going to gentrify Baltimore, turn it into a nice place to live. It's another example of how liberal theory can't really connect with the road. They're bringing this one up again. RIMF.com. Should whites apologize for slavery? Well, if I had ever owned a slave, yeah, I would. But I've never owned a slave. I don't know anybody who's ever owned a slave. Why are we supposed to be apologizing for something we did not do? Why are we expected to pay reparations for something we did not do? And by the way, the slaves themselves, they're all dead and gone. And let's not forget all of the white guys who lost life and limb in a civil war that was, at least in part, to end slavery. Where's the thanks to them? Now, in the lead-up to the Civil War, my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad. The building is kind of dilapidated, but it's still there, and the little hidden room where they kept the slaves is still there. And it was the 2 stops away from the Canadian border. The slaves would stay one day in this building, then at night they'd move to the next one, and then the following day they'd get across the border to Canada. Now, can you imagine if I went up to Canada and I located the descendants of those slaves my ancestors helped to freedom and said, you owe me for that? You know what would happen, right? They would laugh me off their front porch, and they would be fully justified to do that. Because I personally had nothing to do with it. Had I been alive back then, yes, I would have helped. I would have taken part. But I didn't. And I will not take credit for things I have not done, nor will I accept the blame and responsibility for things that happened before I was even alive. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I just got an email talking about this apologizing for slavery. And the email asks, when are the owners of the private central banks going to apologize for enslaving us all and set us free? Probably when the dark regions freeze over. And you need to understand the mindset of the private central bankers, and it's exactly the same as the owners of those antebellum plantations. They truly believed that this was the way the world is supposed to be, with them as the masters and everybody else working to make them rich. In their own minds, they're good people. And it's going to be very, very difficult to convince them otherwise. In fact, in the case of the antebellum plantations, it took a war to say what you're doing is morally wrong. Okay, now getting on back to this issue, this is a very scary article, and it came on out from shtfplan.com. Back in March, the President of South Africa made a suggestion that upset a lot of people. Jacob Zuma announced that he wanted the government to begin confiscating white-owned lands and then redistribute them to black South Africans. In other words, a repeat of what they tried to do in Zimbabwe, which was a horrific failure. Zuma wants a pre-colonial land audit of land use and occupation patterns to decide which lands should be taken. And basically is taking this position apparently to achieve political parity with a rival party known as the Economic Freedom Fighters, who are also calling for the confiscation of white-owned lands. Obviously, the white people in South Africa are now very, very nervous about what is going on. And they did it in Zimbabwe, and contrary to the expectations of everybody, it did not solve their economic problems, because the economic problems were not related to who owned the land, but the imposed debt from outside. And Zimbabwe wound up with paper notes that said $100 trillion on them. That's how out of control that it got. A lot of people talking about this phishing attack on Google Docs, and apparently the way it's working is you'll receive an email from somebody you think you know that includes an invitation to view a Google document. Now, in order to view a Google document, you have to log into your Google account, and this phishing attack does send you to Google, but what it does is as you're signing into your Google account, it is acquiring your login credentials. And then it sends itself to everybody who's in your contact list. And apparently it's spread like wildfire all over the globe, stealing people's Google login credentials. Now, I'm not sure what value there is in that. And the good news is Google has already found a way to disable this, so it's not going to work any longer. But there is an article on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, what to do if you fell victim to this attack, how to correct it. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got a caller waiting, but before I take the phone call, I'm noticing on the Fox News feed, they're spending a lot of time on this issue of Huma Abedin, who is refusing to answer questions about the email server and questions about just why her emails were being sent to the laptop being used by Anthony Weiner, who did not have a security clearance to see those emails. And, of course, Comey tried to make it look like it was just, ordinary, automatic, no criminal intent. But, again, under Title VIII, criminal intent is not required. The mere exposure of classified information in an insecure environment, that is the felony violation right there. I'm starting to get a feeling that they're going to make a big show of punishing Huma Abedin as the sacrificial lamb to save Hillary Clinton. Hillary is taking Huma Abedin and throwing her to the wolves. And hopefully, Huma will make her own deal with prosecutors, and she's got other things stashed away that will make Hillary a little bit nervous. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, one quick comment about Huma. I kind of think she might be a Mossad agent. A guy like Weiner can't marry a Muslim and survive in New York. Now, as far as South America goes, that land used to be very productive. They exported tons of food. So by handing it over to the blacks, all they do is just turn around and make that land unproductive. It cuts the food down in circulation. But who's going to end up with that land in 50 years from now? That land is going to go from the blacks into the hands of other people. They will lose that land to other people.
If the land is not productive, they're not going to be able to pay their taxes. Yeah, they'll either sell the land off cheap to speculators, or it'll be confiscated by the government for unpaid taxes.
Yeah, and we know who the speculators are. So this is a land grab, very clever to get in to cut down the food production. That was very productive, like southern that land in California. So it drives the prices of food up, and it takes it out of circulation. So I think there's more to this land grab than just being fair to the blacks. That's all I got to say today. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Mark in Georgia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you know as well as I do that the official account of history and, as you say, what really happened are two different things. One of the things that I learned when I was involved in an effort to reinstate the organic constitution and the lawful government was that there were union slaveholding states that, because there was repeated use of the words like rebel and rebellion, how can you have a rebellion against authority you didn't agree to in the first place? That those four union slaveholding states were completely unaffected by what was illegitimately called the Emancipation Proclamation. In other words, the state where Lincoln had the power to free those slaves, he did nothing. And in the state that had yet to be conquered, it was just, well, eventually you're going to get freed. But the observation is correct. We went from overt, oppressive slavery for a few to insidious slavery for all of us. And if these people really are Jews, and the thing is, let's look at Leviticus 25, and especially verse 23. But the thing is that, when I call for a Jubilee, I recognize that I've read that chapter very carefully, and it doesn't explicitly say that debt is forgiven. But the thing is, this idea that they loaned us money, there's really nothing to be forgiven. It's just a bunch of bookkeeping entries that's leading us to a very bad place historically. That
yes.
make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense here. And again, the reason I phrased Lincoln's entry into the Civil War was saying, at least, in part for slavery, is we understand the real issue was to bring the seceding states back into the Union by force, but that was not an issue that the people in the Union were willing to go to war for. And so Lincoln exploited the slavery issue as his hue and cry to get popular support for the war. It was his deception to start the war, just like Woodrow Wilson used the Lusitania, McKinley used the USS Maine, Lincoln used the issue of slavery, because the real reasons for the war were not something the ordinary people were going to get all excited about.
Yeah, so you'd be in favor of, I think that pamphlet that Major General Smedley Butler wrote, and I appreciate your effort about taking that one line, all wars are bankers' wars. I think we need to update that pamphlet, War is Still a Racket, and go through all the treasonous lies that FDR, and every war has had, but we're good and they're bad. And it's like, yes, according to your dishonest narrative, we're good and they're bad, but the truth is they're sinners and so are we. And we need to own up to the fact that our sin is indulgable for accepting this prideful narrative that says we're the good guys, but then you get past their narrative and you realize they started everything in his power to provoke the Japanese. They knew when, where, and how the Japanese were going to attack. And if we're not going to deal with traitors among us, don't tell me about how the bad guy over there is threatening our freedom. So our government's got to beat them to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common tactic they try and use. But again, the reason they're not getting a lot of traction is because at this point, pretty much everybody in the world knows the U.S. government was lying about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and that makes everybody very cautious about more recent statements about Assad gassing his own people. They're not just going to go along and say, oh, that madman gassed his own people. They're going to say, wait a minute, we got lied to before. Let's think this thing through. Why would Assad do it? Who does it help? Doesn't help him, helps the U.S. Therefore, are we dealing with another false flag? And false flags are a reality of history. We have an article on my website of 47 false flags that have been officially admitted to, where the governments that pulled off these frauds have stood up and said, yeah, we did it, we snookered you real good, we're proud of it. And for every one they're officially admitting, there are probably 100 that are still considered classified.
Right, and that's the thing is that the problem is that the people that are politically biased towards the neoconservative warfare state, they still believe it, not because, the thing I say, otherwise sane, otherwise reasonable, otherwise intelligent, otherwise moral, but in their political mentality, they're oblivious to the fact that they've been lied to because they all agree with the same lies, and therefore, collectively, the lies become invisible to them. And that's what I want to get across to them is, you may disagree, but the creator of the universe knows what really happened. And when I talk with Muslims, I say, look, God knows what really happened regarding 9/11. And I promise you, when Jesus returns, he's going to make things right. And you're free to disagree about that, but I take solace.
I do disagree. I do disagree. Mostly because the evil people seem to be getting all the money and power and having all the fun. And that's not the quality of work that you're going to expect to see on the resume of a supreme being.
Well, the thing is, you're looking at things in terms of this life. I'm looking past that to say, yes, for a time they're being allowed to get away with these things, but, FDR is burning in hell.
Well, you see, that's part of the fraud. That's part of the fraud. That's why churches get their tax deductions, because the churches are out there saying, yes, even though the rulers are crapping all over you and abusing you and stealing your money and killing your children, just stay calm and pray and trust us. In the next life, they're going to get slapped around good and hard. And it's just another way of keeping.
I'm not condoning.
It's another way of keeping ordinary people in line and not challenging the ruling class. And it's why churches.
You understand? I'm not condoning their impunity, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm not agreeing that.
All right,
that
Mark.
I don't believe in impunity. Yes.
Mark, okay. We've had enough time on this topic, and I think I've made my point here. We're going to drop you, and we're going to switch over to Mike in Maryland. Aloha. Before we do Mike in Maryland, going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now we're going to go to Mike in Maryland.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. What we're witnessing now, the beginnings of in South Africa, has already occurred in formerly Rhodesia, is white genocide.
Yes.
Because many, if not most, of the farmers in formerly Rhodesia were killed or slaughtered in order to take their land. And I think you're going to see that in South Africa as well, where you're going to see mass genocide against the white populace. And Rhodesia used to be a net exporter of food. It was a breadbasket of southern Africa, and now it's a starving country that has to import food when it can buy it. So the same thing is going to happen in South Africa. You're going to have blacks take over the farmland and other industries that possibly aren't as educated or as knowledgeable about maintaining the farms and the industries, and you're going to see the South African economy go south real quick. And
yeah, I'm expecting that as well. But the reason I wanted to talk about these stories is because of all of this rhetoric we're seeing here in the United States of America about we got to get rid of the whites and we've got to make the whites go away and make the whites subordinate. And so, I mean, it could actually start happening here, and that is a very, very scary situation here.
Well, yeah, you're seeing the demonization of white people, and there's no excuse for slavery or American apartheid. But you know, I never enslaved anybody. But yeah, I think what you could see here is an escalation of more and more riots from the SJW warriors and BLM movement, where you'll see something happen similar to what happened in the Ukraine, where people are shot to both sides and stir up the passions and hatred, where you could potentially have a coup and a communist or fascist government put in place.
Well, we're already a fascist government, so I think a coup might bring about a socialist one. And that would be a loss here, because I think properly managed capitalism is still the best system out there. But unfortunately, as Vladimir Lenin pointed out, when capitalism fails, it inevitably devolves into fascism to protect the wealth and privilege of those at the top.
Well, I think we're more communist than fascist, but really there isn't much difference between the two.
There's a lot of difference between the two.
Not really.
Yeah, actually.
It's the origin of corporations and government one way or the other. The private central bank is one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto.
That is the merging. First of all, certainly the Communist Manifesto was the workers collectively owned the factories. So you were.
Well, that's the fantasy that they want to portray to give workers and the downtrodden a false sense of hope and security. But of course, it's all a big lie, because the people at the top are going to commiserate with the corporations and the wealthy. Wall Street put the communists in power in 1917. That's a well-known fact.
Well, I think it comes down to it almost doesn't matter what system you're talking about, communism, fascism, capitalism, or something that has yet to be invented. The weak point is the quality of the human beings who are living in that system. Because inevitably the bad people who are willing to do things, ordinary people or not, are going to find a way to get their hands on that wealth and power, and then they're going to start abusing it the way we're seeing George Soros and Bill Gates do right now. Anyway, Mike, I need to let you go. We're running out of time, and I got some stories I got to cover here. We were talking before about hacking, Google Docs, all the rest of it. Apparently, Microsoft Outlook servers, which is what is at the ISP end of your Outlook email account. Apparently, they've been having some kind of a problem for 2 months now, which is resulting in some very bizarre behavior. Apparently, some of the domains for Outlook and MSN Mail Service are being deprecated and have to be replaced. Somebody just wrote in about that. We'll try and find an article about that. But here's a very interesting article. This is out of Computer World. Right now, about 80% of Americans receive their paychecks via direct deposit. But if a hacker manages to reroute your paycheck to their account, is it just tough luck you don't get paid? And apparently a faculty member at Western Michigan University found that out the hard way. His Go WMU account was hacked, and his direct deposit paycheck was rerouted to a bank in Utah. The crime was traced to a computer in New Mexico, but they were only able to recover $11 of his paycheck, and he's on the hook for that. The more they computerize all of the economy, the more vulnerable you will be to this cyber crime. If you're given a paper paycheck in your hand, you can take it to your bank in the certain knowledge nobody's going to hijack it on the way. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I just read your article that you had posted about South Africa and the comparisons with Zimbabwe and all that, and I've been listening to what you've been saying about the Civil War. And I too am from the North, and all my relatives fought for the North and so on. My wife is African American, and I go through this conversation with her side of the family quite a bit. This whole white guilt thing, and I say, because I'm German and Scots Irish, the Romans imprisoned the Germans, and the Scots and the Irish. Everybody's been imprisoned or been enslaved at one time or another. And as a matter of fact, there's still slavery in Africa, as we know, and especially in like the Sudan and places like that, by blacks of other blacks.
Yes.
But what I say is, where white people did not invent slavery, which is often we're accused of, we did invent. At least the British and the New Englanders invented the concept of abolitionism. That indeed was a white invention.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say that. It just drives me nuts when I talk to them, and nobody seems to connect those dots.
Well, they're listening to rhetoric, and that's what's dangerous about it. This is not a careful analysis of history. This is somebody pushing this anti-white agenda for a specific reason. And again, those who are caught up in it, they're not really interested in the facts. They're living a post-truth, fact-free state of being. And again, Gilad Osman talks about that in his book, Being in Time. They want to memorize the jingo. They want to revel in their sense of victimhood. I am where I am in life because of oppression from the evil white male heterosexuals, and that makes them feel good about themselves. And they fall into that. And Hillary exploited it tremendously last year. And unfortunately, as a society, we're going to be feeling the after effects of all of that race baiting and feminist victim mongering. We're going to be dealing with that for years and years to come.
You know, Michael, if your theory is correct about the removing people's identity is correct, and I actually believe that it is. The biggest, the world government, the New World Order people must see North American white people and Europeans with money and education and affluence and significant numbers as the biggest impediment to their taking over. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're a particular target.
I think we're a target more as a scapegoat mechanism because certainly China is a major block in the goal of the New World Order, and I don't think we can confuse too many of them of being white.
Right.
You know, white people are okay to blame. We're going to blame the white people for everything. Oh, the bad white people, the bad white people. It's just a scapegoating mechanism. You know, Hitler did it with the Jews, and some governments are doing it with the Muslims, and a lot of people in this country are doing it with white people.
You're right. Well, thanks, Mike. That's it for me, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and I think that clears the phone lines for us. Let me just do this. Now then, Facebook is starting to lose customers because of the censorship, and they have issued a warning about slower ad growth, and their stock price has declined. So we're having an effect. We're having an effect just like happened with Starbucks, just like happened with Target. Remember what your business is and stop bringing the politics into it, or we, the American consumer, are going to extract a price. We're going to go someplace else. We're going to take our business someplace. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's see, getting on back to the news here. Now, a little bit of good news up in Seattle, Washington. The city of Seattle has issued a rule requiring cable internet service providers to first obtain your permission to sell your data to advertisers, blackmailers, whoever else wants their hands on that. And I'm sure the cable providers are going to try and find some way to get your permission. They may say that you'll get a discount on your bill if they're allowed to sell your data. But at least the choice is back in your hands. And you can make that decision for yourself. Too many decisions about your personal information are being made without you, and that is very, very risky. Now, there is a new threat to your privacy, and as it turns out, the microphones on smartphones are actually able to hear outside the range of human hearing by a little tiny bit. Maybe it's intentional, but it is already being exploited because apparently consumers can be tracked through the use of ultrasonic tone built into advertising fixtures or store shelves so that smartphone code can literally figure out where you are in the store and send that information to the retailer. That's right out of Minority Report, and that's a little bit scary. And because, again, I'm a private person, and I'll make my own decisions. And here's the interesting thing. If you're looking at buying certain things at a store, why does it matter that the store knows you were there at that rack? Obviously, when you show up at the cash register, they know you bought the product. Or maybe they're going to just study what you're looking at but haven't bought yet and try and apply some heavy advertising to it. Now, the war of words is continuing between Director Comey and WikiLeaks. FBI Director Comey is slamming WikiLeaks, is calling it intelligence porn. Oh, those people, they're only reading WikiLeaks because they're getting a thrill from it. It's banned, it's forbidden. That's the only reason they're interested. No, actually we're interested in seeing just where the United States government is failing to live up to its contractual obligations to the American people as set forth in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Because at some point, the American people are going to have to face that question. Are you getting the government you're told you're paying for? Or like Spectrum, are you paying the money and you're only getting 10% of what you expect? Now, as you know, last week, the National Security Agency came on out with a grandiose announcement. We are not reading your emails anymore. Go on and just write about the nuclear bomb you're building in your basement in your emails. We promise you we're not looking at it. Then William Binney came on out and said, no, the way the system is designed, they have to scoop up all the email info before they can go to an individual targeted with a proper warrant. And then we even had a story that came out in the corporate media saying, yeah, the spying is continuing. Despite the new law that was passed, despite the assurances of the NSA, it's totally, totally out of control. And now Judge Napolitano is weighing in on what he calls the NSA octopus. He's saying there's more spying, more lying, and basically he's saying because Trump knows that he has been the victim of overzealous and unlawful surveillance, that maybe there's going to be a debate over renewal of Section 702 to try and put more limitations on there. Because for all the spying the NSA has done, we can't see that they've actually accomplished anything at all, other than build the world's largest collection of private amateur porn, according to Edward Snowden. Anybody who's really planning a terror attack or a crime knows not to go on the internet or email or smartphones, because it is all being watched. It's an invasion of our privacy that cannot actually accomplish anything reasonable. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, apparently, earlier this week, the Office of Director of National Intelligence released a report that confirmed Barack Obama's White House used NSA technology to gather information on more than 30,000 Americans in 2016, which included both metadata and the actual contents of the communications, and then circulated these intelligence reports without removing the names. This is illegal. So it's just coming on out, bit by bit. Will the government do anything about it? No. Now, here's a very interesting article. As you know, a lot of us in the truth movement, we're being harassed. We're having our careers wrecked. We're being threatened. Our servers attacked. We're always saying, oh, it's FBI and NSA. Actually, it turns out there are now private companies like Blackwater, to which the FBI and the NSA are outsourcing their harassment of targeted individuals so that they can say their hands are clean. No, we're not the ones who ruined your career. No, we've got absolutely no record of it. And technically they're correct, because the harassment and career wrecking and the threats and everything are being handled by these private companies. And one of these companies is James Byman and Associates. It's based in Fairfax. It's just down the street from a whole bunch of three-letter agencies, and they have developed special tools for the FBI. And their job for the government is to hack into computers and phones of watch-listed individuals and targeted individuals. So the spying is still continuing. Cybercrime is still continuing. And not only is it a violation of the Fourth Amendment, not only is it a return to the abuses of COINTELPRO, it's not going to work, because any real criminals or real terrorists know better than to use modern electronics. They'll go back to something else. There's an interesting story in the run-up to the second war in Iraq. They were running a battle exercise, and there was the good guy forces, and then they tagged some general and said, you're going to play Iraq, and we're going to come on in and invade you. And much to their embarrassment, the OPFOR general succeeded in winning the battle. And all he did was to turn off all the electronics. And they sent communication by hardline. They had a lot of pre-planning and code words going on, because the United States has become over-dependent on this ability to go into your computers and your smartphones and listen to you, and they've allowed other methods to just sort of fade away. Even today we're hearing about the lack of so-called ground truth, meaning assets in other countries. So anybody who decides not to play on the playing board the United States has set up has a natural advantage. So let's talk about human-caused global warming. Earlier this week we showed a video that's talking about a report on massive crop losses all over Europe and the United States, and how it's already leading to a doubling of food prices. and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Apparently, California's vineyards got hit really hard. They lost 50% of the grapes. And it turns out it's not just fruits and vegetables, because they had a huge snowstorm that really hammered western Kansas, but also hit areas of southeast Colorado. They got 10 inches of snow. And as a result, everybody thought spring was here. They'd already put the cattle out to pasture. And hundreds of cows have frozen to death. And that is going to start pushing up on the already high beef prices. Good reason to go vegetarian right now. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Philip in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. What's on my mind is how Trump, I don't think he really understands the economy because, let's say, they're trying to push for this health care where, pre-existing conditions, they're in there, you know, they're in there and they can't be removed, and they don't know that that's going to drive up the health care costs in itself. They don't understand how the free market basically works in insurance.
Well,
what's your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on that is they have to address the pre-existing condition issue, because when Obamacare was first brought out, remember Obama was saying if you like your plan, you can keep your plan, which was total nonsense, and policies were being canceled by the health insurance companies in order to force you to buy the more expensive Obamacare policies. And a lot of those policies that were being canceled were policies that had been paid into over decades by people who did have pre-existing conditions. And the health insurance companies were required to care for them. Then when they went into Obamacare, the attitude of the health insurance industry is it's a clean slate. These are all brand new policies, and we have a right to refuse to sell to people with pre-existing conditions, or to basically say those are excluded from coverage. And it was a big hue and cry at that time. So I know you're looking at this from a dollars and cents point of view, but we also have to look at it from the sense of the injustice that was done to these patients with pre-existing conditions, because they had a setup, they had insurance, they were being taken care of, and then all of a sudden Obamacare yanked that away from them, and it's not fair to leave them without some kind of support because of the government's actions.
I agree, but what I'm trying to say here is, so you need, I'm young, so you need young people to buy into these insurance plans. This helps subsidize old people, right?
Well, no, because then you're turning it into another carry forward Ponzi scheme, the way Social Security is. In theory, what you pay for your health insurance collectively within your age bracket should come on back and cover the age. But not everybody who is taking health insurance benefits is necessarily old. There are very young people who are getting very, very sick. We were talking the other day about how all of a sudden middle-aged people, the incidence of strokes has doubled, possibly as an after effect of some new medication. But in the end, I really think another government-operated health plan is not going to work unless it is a single-payer system. And Ron Paul was absolutely right. Look at the other nations that have got really good working health systems, and let's just copy what they're doing instead of trying to reinvent the stethoscope.
That's right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to see your view on that. And people have a habit of, I'd say, putting themselves in slavery. You know, like how our country has been since its existence. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. It's always because we're voting for the government to help us for it. And if you vote for, say, the government to do something, they have to take away money from you first to pay for what you want. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I see what you're saying. Reagan said exactly the same thing. A government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take away everything that you have. Now, when the country was originally set up, the idea was there were strict limits on campaign donations. There was nowhere near the systemic election fraud that we had. So the members of the legislature and the president were answerable to the public. If they didn't make them happy, no new term. But with the taking off of limits to corporate contributions, candidates no longer need to seek your money. And with the massive election fraud that we're seeing, they no longer really need your votes. And so they're just basically ignoring you. And you're the source of the wealth that pours on into a system that is really all about its own personal glorification and grandiose warmongering.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. You answered my question. I'm not going to try to take up too much of your time. I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. All right. We're going to let you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Kind of a hard connection to understand on that one here. All right. We're talking about human-caused global warming. And there's a very good video on the front of whatreallyhappened.com that says carbon dioxide pollutant debunked. And it's taking some of the hysterical claims being made by the carbon Nazis and saying, let's just go back and look at the actual data records. And they're using data that's actually coming from NOAA and the U.S. Geological Survey and other sources, and they're showing how it is selectively portrayed to convince you there's a crisis, and there isn't one. And I imagine the debate is going to get very intense in the next couple of months because Al Gore's new film, An Inconvenient Sequel, debuts in July. It's already been all over the film shows, and everybody's saying, oh, it's wonderful, it's great, you must go see this. I have a feeling it's going to do terrible box office, but then it's not really about box office. It's about trying to revive the human-caused global warming scare. And by the way, all this stuff we're reporting about crop losses all across the eastern part of the country, cattle freezing to death in Colorado, you're not seeing that on the corporate media, are you? I'm sure it's being covered in the local news out there in Colorado. But they're getting ready to try and sell you another carbon tax. They're absolutely desperate to find another way to trick you out of more of your money. So anyway, there's this video, Carbon Dioxide Pollutant Debunked. It's real good science, and you ought to look at it. Now let's talk about water. Yesterday we were talking about how the city of Flint, Michigan, is starting to issue tax liens on people who have been unable to pay their water bills. And it's not like you have people who are rebelling and saying, I refuse to pay the water bills. I'm sure that they'd like to pay their water bills. But look at the economic realities in that part of the country. They don't have the money. And that's ignoring the fact that the water in Flint, Michigan is now actually dangerous to drink because of some reckless cost-cutting measures they took. Well, it's not confined to Flint, Michigan. I'm looking at this story out of Russia Today, how the United States is facing a nationwide drinking water crisis. 77 million Americans were exposed to unsafe drinking water in 2015. And apparently it was not just lead, it was also copper. And the study pointed out that penalties for water safety violations are basically non-existent. These water companies can put whatever they want in the pipes, and there's really no recourse. Another article, this in Natural News. 38 states have discovered toxic lead levels in children. And this was a study published in Pediatrics, flagship journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the researchers pooled data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and they revealed that 38 states and the District of Columbia have childhood lead exposures of 10 micrograms per deciliter or higher. This can cause brain damage. Now, you want to talk about whether the United States is the greatest nation on earth or whether it ever was or ever will be again. One of the most fundamental things that we expect from our government is the basic necessities of life, like water, that it will be safe to drink coming out of that faucet. And we don't have that anymore. And that's another sign to me that this government is heading to a Soviet Union-style collapse. Now, here is another story. This is very, 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 very sad. Being reported over in the Daily Mail. Child suicide attempts have doubled in the last decade. And data from 32 children's hospitals across the United States shows that around 120,000 under-17s have been treated for attempts to take their own life since 2008. But the majority of that has come in recent years. Now, what has changed in those last few years? Well, yes, the United States is a more stressful place to be living in. But we're seeing that age group be marketed and saturated with these prescription antidepressant drugs. And if you go over to ssristories.org, you will see case after case after case of people who are perfectly okay. Their doctors will put them on these medications, and then all of a sudden they'll get an urge to kill themselves that they can't stop. And I went through this myself when I was dealing with the aftermath of the breakup of my first marriage, and I went to my doctor for a completely unrelated issue. And she was saying, how are you handling the breakup? And I said, well, I'm not entirely cheerful. And she said, you want some of this, and wrote me a prescription, and I can't remember what it was specifically. But I got on there with the, following, take a pill here, and so forth and so on. And for about 4 weeks, I was happy, and I was fun to be with. And then in the 5th week, I had this crash, this backfire that was just horrible. And that's why I will never, ever take those medications ever, ever again. Another story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently more than 6 million patients have been given the wrong prescription information on statins. And they're either on the wrong type of the drug or the recommended dosage is inaccurate. And doctors are saying the situation should be corrected as a public health priority. They're saying this is a real crisis out there. They're saying GPs should avoid keeping patients on out-of-date prescriptions through inertia. They need to look at it. Statins have never proven to be effective. In fact, more and more people are thinking statins are actually causing more deaths than they're helping people, because the plaque is coming off the artery, not slowly, not gradually, but breaking off in huge chunks that then finds its way into a very inconvenient location. I suspect that's what happened to my youngest brother. Now, for all you history buffs, this is interesting. Apparently, a Union Jack banner flown by the Coldstream Guards at the Battle of Waterloo has been found in a shoebox in East London by a window fitter. Apparently there are numbers, serial numbers, on this flag, and it was flown at the Battle of Puigdemont on June 18, 1815. Somebody must have saved it as a souvenir, hid it in the shoebox, forgot all about it, now that it's been rediscovered. I think that is so cool. I think that is so cool. All right, we're going to be coming up here on another commercial break, and when we come on back, last segment of our program today, apparently there's another outbreak of Lyme disease, and more, apparently young Europeans want to get out of the European Union as well. The tide is turning. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today. There is a very popular TV series called Breaking Bad. It's in reruns now. When it was first out, I didn't watch it because I have a negative reaction to the illicit drug industry, and a lot of that goes back to some unpleasantness with my first wife. But when it was coming up on the final episodes, I tuned in and I realized it actually was a very good show, especially William White, the lead character, who was a teacher who was drawn to cooking methamphetamine to pay off his cancer bills and take care of his family, which you start thinking that's a very understandable situation here. Well, apparently this has happened in real life. Over in New Mexico, there's a science teacher in a high school, and apparently they weren't paying him what he needed. So they caught him running a meth lab. And that's kind of a little tacky. Now, here's something that's very interesting. We're hearing about a very large crack on the Antarctic ice shelf that may be getting ready to spawn a monster iceberg, which does happen from time to time. And it isn't evidence of global warming. The thickness of the ice, in fact, is going the other way. But apparently, over at the United Arab Emirates, they're looking at a serious water shortage, and they are planning to tow icebergs from Antarctica to help with the drinking water issues, because the ice that is coming off Antarctica is freshwater ice. And it is a great source for fresh water, and it's a very good idea. It's been suggested before to ease water shortages in other parts of the world. And they're going to give it a try, and I wish them a lot of luck to get that going here. And let's see. Apparently, Macron, during his TV debate, has been called on a goof when he was talking about France's economy, about how big it was, and apparently his math work was very inaccurate, and he's been called on that along with all the other things that went wrong for him in that debate. Now, I'm hoping Le Pen wins the runoff, but again, I am expecting there to be massive election fraud in the election, because that's unfortunately the way the globalists are keeping control over us. They let us pretend that we have elections. They let us pretend that we have some kind of a say over what's going on. But the reality is quite different, that we are the playthings of the rich people of the world, which is not pleasant to think about. I don't like it. I can't imagine any parent raising a child right now looking forward and realizing that that child's life is going to be directed at the whim of people like George Soros or Bill Gates, who just have their heads full of all kinds of fantasies, and nobody with the courage to stand up to them and say, what you're doing is actually causing harm, more harm than good. So that's where we are. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Tonight is choir night for the Lady Claire, and Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3 of tomorrow. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.